Hello, I'm Bay Mud here with yet another weird MIDI guitar. This time, it's Inspired Instruments' short-lived U-Rock guitar YRG-1000, specifically the Generation 2 model. Let's take a look at what this thing is, some pros and cons, and who it might be good for. Hint, if you can get one cheap, it's pretty fun as long as you treat it like its own thing and don't expect a seamless transition from regular guitar. You'd think a guy only needs so many quirky MIDI guitars, and you'd be right, but somehow they keep falling into my lap. Case in point, there I was, minding my own business after making videos on the Casio MG510, which I borrowed, my Fishman triple play pickup, and the goofy Yamaha YRG-1000, when a kind soul slid into my DMs on Instagram offering this strange relic for cheap, stating they figured I might be able to make a video or two with this. Have I really become the MIDI guitar dad, as my pal Phil calls me? In any case, it's got a silly name, feels like a toy, but let's lower our expectations and take a look at the YRG-1000 in all its strange, not quite glorious glory. The original model was released around 2010 with a different neck, which I also have tucked away somewhere, and retailed for around $200 US. This slightly updated Gen 2 version came out a few years later, followed in 2014 by this optional radius neck with more traditional fret spacing for an extra $100 or so on its own. Inspired Instruments eventually even released a more expensive third model called the Lineage, but I only learned about that while looking up when the company folded, so that should give you an idea of how well that went. Anything I could find suggests they were already out of business by about 2018, if not sooner. Essentially, the U-Rock is another attempt at a sort of button-style guitar controller instrument, but instead of the clicky buttons of the YRG, it has a more sleek, soft, membrane-style fretboard. It boasts a somewhat cheesy internal sound set that you can mix and match using two different layers labeled guitar and synth, respectively, as well as a chorus effect and whammy bar for pitch bends, a substitute for the membrane fretboard's lack of vibrato support. Users can save presets with their favorite sound combos and settings, as well as play along to a bevy of internal guide tracks. No tears in heaven this time. The onboard U-Rock mode furthers this concept by providing an option to reward you with a soft buzz sound whenever you hit an off-key note. Who wouldn't love that? It kind of becomes a fun game to try and only play notes that don't fit the current backing track. I've heard guitar players praise the tap mode, which allows you to play one-handed via tapping the fretboard and is apparently good for quickly entering MIDI notes. There are also a bunch of settings to fine-tune the behavior of things like hammer-ons. However, much like the YRG, pull-offs are still not recognized on open strings. No internal speaker or MIDI in either, so your fingers are really the only external hardware capable of triggering the built-in sounds. Overall, it feels like a cross between a video game controller and a quirky travel toy. It's telling that a few reviews I found described it as a guitar-like instrument, which hits the nail on the head pretty well, as it doesn't quite feel like you're playing a real guitar, but something that is trying its best to be one. Sort of like an alien disguised as a human that's trying to fit in, but not quite nailing it. A lot of that is likely down to the smaller than guitar body size, as well as the toy-like plastic build quality that creaks like one of my old Transformers with every slight movement. It's hard not to once again mention the Yamaha EZAG in comparison, as that is also plastic and a bit toy-like, but for some reason my expectations were so low with that model that it ended up winning me over, whereas I guess I expected more from the U-ROC, as it came out 10 years later, touting amazing accuracy and tracking, but while it is fun, it still requires you to change your playing enough to make it work well. For example, my particular style of playing seems to result in some extra notes here and there. Or maybe I just struggle to play cleanly enough for it, so I could always practice. But that speaks a bit of the key to enjoying and making use out of the U-ROC. You sort of have to treat it like its own instrument, with its own nuances and expectations, and play to its strengths. Basically, if you're looking for accuracy and guitar-like feel, you're better off with something like the Fishman Triple Play. I'd also love to try a Jamstick someday, but I still find myself having fun making noise with the U-ROC. I'm generally of the view that with the right mindset and price, even the most maligned gear can be a lot of fun. So let's talk positives, as there are some interesting features available here. First off, the U-ROC comes apart, presumably for easier travel, so you could theoretically pop the neck off and pack the two pieces in a bag to bewilder wildlife on your next camping trip. Just bring headphones. Otherwise, it makes it easier to find room for it in that bin under your bed full of stuff you forgot you owned. The aforementioned whammy bar is a lot of fun and can be adjusted to affect one or both parts, not to mention you can set the bend range to be extra subtle or flat out ridiculous. The ability to layer two sounds can be great for lush presets, and you can also split the sounds between two zones on the neck, which can be quite handy. Most importantly, the two sound layers can each have their own MIDI channel. So if you don't like the internal sounds, you can easily trigger two different external synths via MIDI. This applies to the split points too, so you could have the bass strings trigger a synth bass and the rest doing an ARP, for example, all while layering in the built-in U-ROC sounds as much or as little as you want. It also has a larger assortment of alternate tunings and MIDI presets than something like the EZAG, so I could see using this to get out of my comfort zone and experiment beyond just standard tuning, for example. Of course, I should mention one clear advantage the U-ROC has over the EZAG is the full neck. There are no frets interrupted by a learning section of buttons and things that you never want to press. So you have access to all the frets, and actually you can do some stuff with the fretboard to control the synth parameters. When you're in a menu, you use the fretboard to select your parameters, which is pretty cool. And of course, a huge positive for me at least is that mine came with the optional little headstock attachment, which is just enough to actually hang it on the wall, unlike the Yamaha EZAG, which has to take up room on a stand. So who is it for? Well, it seems back in 2013 like Inspired Instruments was trying to court both gamers who wanted to learn guitar and also synth-curious established players. But I would think it would be awkward to learn on one of these, and my personal experience is that I haven't been able to simply play the U-ROC like a normal guitar either, so I can see why it wasn't embraced by either group. To want one of these in 2025, you'd have to come at it knowing the limitations and be looking for something weird and fun to inspire you as a greater part of a unique setup. Personally, I love that the U-ROC exists and will always give weird instruments like this a shot. Their success will depend on your mindset, overall expectations, and, like anything else, how much you paid, because I think you can still get these pretty cheap at the moment. At the very least, it's certainly a conversation starter. With that in mind, let's file this under the well-established category of, if you can get one cheap, it might be fun as long as you go in with lowered expectations. And hopefully it goes without saying, I'm a hardware enthusiast, so I do know that things like MIDI Guitar 3, etc. exist. I'm just not that interested in sitting at the computer, so I'm usually hunting down weird hardware synths or guitar stuff. So just keep that in mind as I give my recommendations on whether this is for you or not. I'm a hardware guy. Do you have a YRG guitar or even a Lineage? Let me know how you're liking it in the comments. Personally, I think my MIDI guitar itch is currently scratched well enough by the Fishman triple play pickup on my Telecaster, but I'm open to checking out whatever other weird options are out there. And if you have any questions about the YRG in the meantime, get in touch. Thanks for watching. More to come soon.